Hello, everyone, and a huge welcome to our fifth annual Gender Equity, Diversity and Tech webinar. I'm very, very happy being with you today. This year is definitely a very, very special one, and it is certainly even more important than the 5 previous years to exchange ideas, belief, and advice. Diversity and gender equity are really part of what I believe in and core belief outnumberly. And we do believe it's important to keep speaking up about. And I do thank you, everybody here, because nowadays it needs courage to speak about this subject. So a huge thank you. We have amazing guests today. We will start with 2 amazing leaders. Welcome to Katie Stanton and Vincent Wernery. I really do thank you for your presence and your courage. Katie, you've had an incredible professional journey. You've worked in big tech company, Yahoo at its early days, then Google, Twitter. You were VP of Global Media. And you also held positions within the US government, both in the exec office of President Obama at the time and a special advisor for the Office of Innovation within Hillary Clinton State Department. Today, you're working to really empower the next generation of leaders and founders. As you are the founder and general partner of Moxys Ventures, it's an early stage venture firm focused on supporting founders who build product and service with a positive impact. We're very happy to have you with us. Welcome, Katie. And having someone from the US is really important today for us. Vincent, you have an incredibly multicultural experience. And a deep expertise on healthcare and skincare. You've spent 15 years at L'Oréal, working all over the world, Portugal, Germany, Japan, France, as a regional general manager, then more than 5 years at Sanofi, and now we could say that you're combining these experiences in your role of CEO of Beiersdorf. Beiersdorf is a mother company of Nivea and other amazing brands. A company with over 130 years of skincare and pharmacy expertise, so incredible history. With world-renowned brands such as Nivea, we said it, and Zaplast, Labello, La Prairie. We all use it every day. It's just impressive. Your engagement for sustainability, democracy, gender equity, and diversity and inclusion is just impressive. And we can't wait to hear more about how you brought this deep belief, because you have deep belief. This is true today. We can see it to action at Beiersdorf and beyond. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome, Vincent. And this year, it's a very, very special edition, because for the first time, Loic and I will have a co-host with us. Welcome, Angeles. This is a huge pleasure. You've spent a long time at BCG. You have an incredible experience as board member, Bridgepoint, Edenred. You're chairwoman of Legrand Group, a huge French world leader in electrical product and infrastructures. Thank you for being our co-host today, Angeles. It's really a huge pleasure. And on the subject of gender equity, you have a very international viewpoint, and I wanted you to perhaps help us to contextualize what is currently happening on the political stage at a global level, and why we are seeing such a pushback against diversity and inclusion policies.
Well, thank you, Iselisse and Loic, and thank you all of you for having me as part of the family. This is a huge honor and pleasure, and also the occasion to cross paths with old friends, which is always nice. And bravo for organizing this and maintaining it and showing your commitment through the years. I think consistency and assertiveness and reconfirming engagements is probably one of the secrets of success in this and in many other things. I'm going to start by sharing with you a sentence that was written a long ago. It was written in 1949, and it goes like this: never forget that all it takes is a political, economic, or religious crisis for women's rights to be called into question. These rights are never permanently acquired. You will have to remain vigilant throughout your life. This sentence was written in 1949 by Simone de Beauvoir, that's the famous French writer and philosopher who was a very well-known feminist theorist. And reading that today in 2025, you see, I mean, it takes a complete different sense and a complete different content in the current context. I have to be honest, I had completely forgotten this sentence. And would I have read this probably maybe 5 years ago, I would have thought, okay, you know, it was such a different era. I mean, we are beyond that. Simone, you're wrong. We thought we had won the battle of gender equality, frankly. I mean, our generation, which is also Isoli's generation and Katie, because we're about the same age, the three of us, we felt, okay, it's not all done, but basically we don't need to discuss the principle anymore. Now it's just a matter of implementation. It's a matter of time. There will not be a way back. Our daughters will not have to fight, will not have to demonstrate the interest of all of this, because the principle is already agreed, right? Now it's just a matter of, okay, let's just do it, and we need to embark little by little, companies and organizations and different stakeholders. But we know that our children will live in a much better world from a gender diversity perspective. And let me put maybe a connection for a moment with what happens in climate and environment. I think we all felt collectively that probably from an environment and climate perspective, our children and the generations to come would have a very, very challenging time, because it was a very difficult problem to solve. And despite all our efforts, our best scenarios in the medium term were basically of a sort of stop the negative impact rather than actually progressing in the right direction. With gender, it was very different. We felt basically it was just now a matter of making it the new way to operate rather than having specific measures. And that quotas, not to name them, were just a sort of a step in the process, painful step in the process, necessary evil that was going to give the last push necessary to get this done. And the same way as I haven't crossed paths for a long time with any business leader who are climate skeptics. I haven't, honestly. Maybe I'm being very lucky, but in the areas where I operate, I don't have these conversations anymore on whether you need to have a sort of ESG roadmap and what do you do to decrease your carbon footprint. It's part of the strategy of most companies in the world. I didn't cross paths for a while with people who were gender skeptic and who felt that all of this was a bunch of noise and something that basically was a nice to have, or even worse, something negative for companies. And then 2025 arrives. And there, you know, I have to be honest, when I was starting to hear the signs, starting to watch some sequences, when I was hearing people talking about masculine energy needed to fuel the companies. And this is, who I'm referring to. And he was a super big CEO in the tech sector. And it was 1 month ago. I felt, oh my God, Simone, you're watching us. You were right. We are moving forward. We're moving backwards rather than forward. And as I would say, as a group, as a collective force, we were presumed guilty and condemned. And the W in women was merged with the W in woke. And all of a sudden, we were part of a sort of immense bunch of measures that were perceived as being destroying value, were perceived as being a threat to Western values and culture, were perceived as something that was actually going to destroy rather than build. And when that happens in the most powerful country in the world, which is an opinion leader, which has been for years and years the regulator, the defender of peace and balance. And suddenly we see that country and its leaders lose completely their superego and become some sort of neolithical, if I can use this word, human beings with a combination of power and money together that is showing very alarming signs, because it can question together, those two forces together can question really the progress and can question what will happen in the next 10 years. I'm not even talking about the next year, it's about the next decade. That makes me worried, it makes me sad, it makes me angry. So now, how it makes me feel doesn't really matter. But I just think it's also good to have these forums to be able to share how we feel, to share what it appeals in us, and to feel that there's places that you can still call home and where other people feel the same in front of these events. Why did we get here? That's something that makes me scratch my head. How on earth could we actually end up really believing that all this progress that we had made was bad for humanity? And I think there was probably, if I reflect, there was probably a sort of growing resistance and sort of growing antibody reactions, probably provoked by a bunch of measures that were perceived by some groups as threatening the status quo, and that were also assimilated to many other topics that had nothing to do with gender equality, but that they were germinating in the society and creating an amazing polarization. And the result of that is, unfortunately, not only a change in public opinion and in the perception, very much, by the way, relayed by social media, which I think can be a force for evil and a source for good. They can be both. But you can see it very, very specifically. D&I departments dismantled. Big corporates moving backwards on the topic. Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture, a female CEO of one of the largest consulting companies in the world, announcing that they are actually pulling back their efforts in D&I. Most companies reducing the amount of slides presented in ESG roadshows and taking out those that speak about D&I. We didn't, and I'll come back to that. So when all of that happens, that puts us in a super difficult spot. It puts us in a difficult spot as leaders, for those of us who are women as women leaders, for those of you who are men as men leaders, and collectively, it puts us in a difficult spot. How do we react to that? How do we react individually? Do we need to be vocal about it? Do we need to sort of embrace and understand that there is some change going on and try to understand what these contrarian voices come from and how can we tackle that and how can we sort of deconstruct what took us here? Do we need to be silent and try not to be seen and wait for this storm to go over our heads and just go back again? Do we need to be more in a fighting mode than ever? How do we need to react individually? I don't have the answer to that. When it comes to commitments, I can see, and I sit in 4 different listed company boards, I can see different ways of looking at commitments. Some companies say, let them shout. I know who I am. I know what I stand for. I'm not going to change a bit of my North Star. Not in this subject, not in any other subject. The world will follow, but I know where I'm going. I might need to tone down a little bit in communications with some investors, for example, but I'm not changing my commitment. Others are more, let's call it pragmatic, where they say, yeah, come on, but my capital is controlled 2/3 by Anglo-Saxon and mostly American pension funds. How am I going to talk to them? How am I going to show them that I listen, right? So is this a classical pendulum move where we went maybe a bit too far, some would say, and then actually the pendulum is going to come back and become, give us to the right sort of balance situation? Or is it a real change that is here to stay? How does it translate into how political parties are growing and developing? Who is taking the power in most countries that are today powerful and meaningful in building the world's opinions and the world's politics? What new barriers will we need to overcome? Because we had to find ways to sort of do better than our mothers and grandmothers did. But will our daughters need to do better than us? Or does this mean that they will have to do better than our mothers or even our grandmothers? How far will this backwards path go and for how long? As you can tell, I have more questions than answers, Iselis, but I would love to hear what all that provokes in you.
Thank you so much. I think we have all a lot of questions, and I do thank you for this context because it put words and feelings that I think we all have and fears perhaps at some point, which is not usual, I think, to feel like that. So, Vincent, thank you being with us. And you were talking about the North Star, and I think you have a very clear North Star, and I do thank you for that. Can you tell us was there a specific turning point in your understanding of gender equity, diversity topics? Can you tell us more about that? Because we are feeling a complex turning point today, but which one is yours?
Thank you, Iselis, for the question. I mean, it was never a burning issue for me, gender diversity. I was the son of a working mother, and even if it was not so popular, France was pretty well advanced, so I was seeing women working around me. It was not an issue. I joined also companies which were pretty advanced. If you look at L'Oréal has always been extremely diverse and pushing women. It was at the time of Jean-Paul Agon, Nicolas Hieronymus, Jean-Claude Legrand. Really, perfect track record. Sanofi also. I think my discovery of the issue of, I would say, of what we could do in terms of managing better diversity started in Japan. I was really shocked when I arrived in Japan to see the role of women. The fact that, in fact, in most of the Japanese company, I could say even all Japanese company, all the board are made of men, that in fact a woman, number one duty is to bring coffee to the men. And here I would say it was my first reaction, very opportunistic reaction. I was able to recruit the best woman for L'Oréal Japan because they didn't want to join Japanese companies. And I was able to have fantastic women, and I still see them every year, just because they had this refusal. There have been most of them through also US universities to refuse that. But my true, I would say, the moment when I decided to be really strategically active was when I moved to Germany. I was very surprised, coming to Germany, the country of Angela Merkel, to see that the women, female leaders had zero role. There was not one single DAX company with a female CEO. Today there are 3. And I mean, for a long time, there was only one Merck, being managed by one. But by the way, she was not even German, she was Spanish. My board, even Beiersdorf, a big beauty company, 7 men, very happy to be among men. We're very proud of having one country manager being a female leader. And clearly, the feeling at this time that we had to have a very strong proactive action in order to change that. And we could not just, have a very high-level speech about gender diversity. We had to talk, but we have more to walk the talk. And this is what I've done as a CEO since I became CEO in 2021.
Thank you very much, Vincent, for sharing that. What about you, Katie? Can you tell us more about your trigger to start acting? You've worked in tech quite a lot, and we know that sometimes it's an environment where parity and inclusion can be very challenging to implement. So can you maybe share how your professional journey has shaped your vision of gender equity and diversity?
That's a great question. So my journey started when I became an active angel investor. I was an operator at Google and then at Twitter, and I started to casually invest in these early stage companies. And in that process, I would see the cap tables of ownership of these companies. And over and over again, I noticed that there were very few women, there were very few people of color, there were very few operators on these cap tables, and started to inquire about why that might be. And a group of women that we were friends and we all worked together, we started this group called #Angels. We partnered with Carta to try to measure that disparity. And this was maybe 8 years ago. And we found that across 6,500 companies, less than 10% of ownership went to women and people of color. And that was really terrible. We knew it was going to be bad, but now we could actually measure it. And so that started the process for me about what could I do. I wanted to be a great investor. I wanted to be an agent of change, but I also, in that capacity, could hopefully make an impact in terms of making sure that there are more women and more people of color who had the opportunity to invest, the opportunity to get funded. And so that was a bit of the input for me to be able to drive some of this change going forward.
Thank you, Katie. Speaking about inclusion more generally, Vincent, first, maybe in the company you've been, what policies, approaches you've seen the most effective when it comes to integrating all groups, such as minorities or people with disabilities?
I think you have to be extremely affirmative. You have to have extremely precise directions. I'm absolutely not afraid of talking about quotas. Clearly, and I will tell that, explain that later, giving a specific objective to all the key leaders of the company in terms of number of women or percentage of women in key position. I did that for gender diversity. I'm doing that right now for people with disabilities. Building also a clear guidance to any kind of recruitment at the same competence we recruit women. We are absolutely not afraid of that. And the good thing that you reach a level, which is today our level, where you are mathematically, mechanically, you are recruiting 50% men, 50% women, because you have already reached the right level of gender diversity. But it's also about communicating. I was really internally and externally building success stories, showing that, a successful woman in a position which was not obvious is creating a lot of ambition. It was very interesting. The moment when I started to use, the internal media to talk about the successful country manager, suddenly a woman applying for the jobs. And often they were winning the pitch because they were better prepared. They were not coming saying, where do I sign the contract? They were coming prepared, having a point of view, and often winning the pitch against other men. And that was something which made, in fact, after a few moments where a few dinosaurs were saying, for a man, you have no future with this company, it became something pretty normal and understood by everybody and becoming the norm. But if you stay very romantic, having big, nice, high-level messages, you don't make it. You don't grow, you don't develop. And again, it's interesting, the story of Merkel, which for me is very striking. You know, I know you all know the famous sentence of Madeleine Albright about, you know, there is a special place in hell for women who are not supporting women. In the German mentality, the few women who succeeded consider that they did what they had to do to succeed. They don't see why they should help other women making that happen. And that's really a belief I heard a lot in the German ecosystem, which I think is wrong. And hopefully now we are no longer into this mindset. And I see also these three female CEOs I was mentioning, they're also talking openly, and there's something happening in Germany. There's really something happening in Germany, much later than anybody else, which is giving me a lot of hope about that.
Thank you so much, Vincent. And Katie, let's hear what you're thinking about this.
I think the most important thing that we can do is accountability and making sure that we're reporting on the data. You can't manage what you can't measure. So that kind of transparency and accountability is really important. There are a lot of practical things that we can do. When I was an executive at Twitter and at Google, one of the things that we did was pay audits and making sure that teams and individuals were paid fairly. And it's one of those things that can get out of whack. Some people negotiate better than others. Some people do that coming into a job or during a job, and doing those types of those audits on a regular basis are really, really important. The other things that are really important are just mentorship and sponsorship, making sure that those, you know, who have the privilege, that have reached positions of power and of influence, are helping the next generation with mentorship. And some of that is sponsorship. It could be getting a visa. It could be getting funding. It could be, wiring, the check. And then the last thing that, I think has been really, really helpful is just really speaking up. Thank you for putting this amazing event together and giving a platform for people to share their experiences and to learn and provide some sunlight in a very dark time.
Thank you so much, Katie. And to develop on this topic of policies and their impact, we're going to take a closer look at the policies and quotas implemented in different countries. It's interesting to talk about quotas at some point regarding gender equity in companies and the impact they've had on the company landscape there. So Anya joined us. She's working in citizenship topics at Numberly, and I think you've prepared a little overview for us. It will be a pleasure, Anya.
Absolutely. Thank you, Iselis, and thank you, Katie and Vincent, because you've also laid out the perfect introduction for this part. So thank you all. So to reflect on our different speakers' backgrounds today, we've chosen to compare the existing corporate gender equity policies and quotas and their impact in 4 countries. So we're going to look at France, Germany, Spain, and the US. So first, we're going to take a look at policies. So in France, we have a handful of regulations surrounding this topic, but we have 3 main binding ones, meaning that not following them can lead to fines. The first one is the Copé-Zimmermann Law of 2011, which aims at having at least 40% of women in boards of directors. Since 2018, we also have the Index for Professional Equality, which aggregates various statistics around pay gaps and promotion opportunities, for instance, and ensures a penalty if a minimum score is not met. And then finally, we also have the Rixin Law of 2021, which enforces equal representation of men and women in executive management and governing bodies, starting with a minimum 30% threshold that will be required next year, and then growing to 40% starting in 2029. Companies will have to declare that number every year and will receive a penalty if they are not conforming. Now, if we take a look at the United States, it's quite a different picture. While NASDAQ listing rules include a comply or explain target for its listed companies to have at least 2 diverse directors, there are no fine-enforced quotas at a federal level. At a state level, there have been some attempts to install one, like in California, for instance, but that law was later deemed unconstitutional. So effectively, there are no quotas at all in the country. In Germany, the main regulation was set in place by the Law on Equal Participation of Women and Men in Leadership Positions of 2015, which in practice applies to around 100 of the biggest companies in Germany and sets a mandatory 30% quota on non-executive boards. This doesn't apply to executive boards, however, where each company is free to set its own target. And then finally, in Spain, we have a law imposing a 40% gender quota on the decision-making bodies of listed and large unlisted companies that was passed in 2023 and will start taking effect next year. It's also important to mention that there's an EU-wide regulation regarding this topic that was agreed on in 2022, and it will enter into effect next year, and it states that large companies operating in the EU will have to ensure a share of 40% of the underrepresented gender among non-executive directors, or 33% among all directors, with sanctions as well to be applied in case of non-compliance. So, now if we look at the impacts of these regulations, well, rather unsurprisingly, what jumps out is that out of the 4 countries here, France being the one with the strictest and the oldest regulation in that field has the highest rates of gender equity overall. If we look at the US, they are clearly lagging behind when it comes to gender equity in boards, since as we've seen, they have no regulation in that field. However, they are rather on par with the rest of the countries globally, which are all pretty much lagging behind in promoting women to executive positions. Interestingly, if we look at Spain, the board quota has had a good effect, but the executive gender equity, again, is still pretty low. And then finally, in Germany, where the figures we're looking at here are mostly driven by non-mandatory targets, we're sitting somewhere in the middle, is what we see. So, what can we see as the takeaway here? Well, as we've seen, quotas are not the only way to drive progress in gender equity. But if we look at this OECD chart here, which compares progress in countries with either no regulations, non-legally binding targets, and actual quotas, we see that quotas are what drives actually progress the fastest. And so I think, Angeles, did you want to comment on? I'd love to hear yours and then Katie's perspective and Vincent.
I would love to comment, Anna, and thank you for that. For many years during my career, I felt offended by quotas as a female executive. My initial reaction to quotas when I was young was, why on earth do we need this? I don't like quotas. I'm working for companies that are performance oriented. I will be judged and evaluated on my performance, and if my achievements are good enough, I will be promoted and have an ascending career. Eventually, those companies delivered the promise, and I never had to feel that I had to do an extra mile to get a fair treatment. But I was wrong, because my reference point did not represent the entire business world. And to me, what quotas do is something really important. They allow us to move from exception to minority. Exceptions get killed by systems. If you have one person who is different than others, and this does not only apply to gender, actually, it applies to all sorts of diversity. When you start to create critical mass, and you start to have a minority that is visible enough to influence the rules of the game, to influence the ecosystem, to influence the ways of thought, this is when you get sustainable change. And quotas allow to do that. And actually, if you take the case of France, which I know a little bit because I've been part of it, and I'm a proud Cope Zimmermann board member, by the way, you can see that beyond the gender diversity, what these laws brought to the boards in France was phenomenal. It increased the diversity in generations. It decreased the diversity in terms of cultural and geographical origins. It increased the diversity in sets of skills. We saw people coming to boards who were younger, who were equipped with digital skills, who were bringing other perspectives in talent, in risk, in so many other ways. So actually boards today, I dare you to find somebody who says that boards in France today are not stronger than they were a decade ago. They are. And it also allowed another thing, which was to breathe, because half of the people who took those seats were people for whom it was a first board mandate. Can you imagine how amazing the renewal was and how much talent became visible and came to enrich the discussions around the table? So I think it's fair to say that I was wrong and that quotas have been an amazing engine and probably the way to go until it becomes a reflex and a usual way of doing and thinking.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
yeah, sure.
Something which I think it's interesting to put in perspective the board and the supervisory board and the executive committee, because it should be on paper easier to make the supervisory board more diverse, because it's a top-down choice. You decide to have a board member, you take somebody external with an expertise, and you put it in the supervisory board. And the challenge is bigger when you want to put somebody in executive board. Is often they are managing big teams. Often, we are promoting people from inside. So if you didn't give a chance to women to get to the top position, there is a small chance that they will get to the board. And what happened is that because there was this much stronger female representation in supervisory board, then the executive board were also obliged to move. The first question that Angeles, when she joined Legrand, I'm sure asked, he was looking at the number of female senior leader, and then what was not really on the agenda became really high on the agenda. And the CEO, even if he didn't want, he had somebody in the board, or many people in the board, asking him for his achievement.
That is so true.
And that's where I think the fact that one precedes the other is, I think, absolutely true. And the moment when Germany is a good example is because now you have 35% of board members which are female leaders, that the 26% of executive role will increase, and is increasing also because of this pressure from the governing body of the company, the one who is deciding the promotion, the salary, the strategy. This is a key body in Germany as well as in the other countries.
Thank you so much. This is definitely instrumental and important to move the lines for perhaps as well company where people have a smaller North Star than others. It's very important, and I think nowadays it will be even more important. And we need to have strong board members to follow this path. I think I hope and believe that board members will have a bigger impact on the next months on this subject to keep the right path. Perhaps we can listen to Katie on that.
I have a very strong opinion here. And ironically, I'm joining you from Vivendi's headquarters in Paris. We have our board meeting today. And 10 years ago, a recruiter approached me and asked me if I wanted to join the Vivendi board, partly because of my background in tech and media. And they also referenced the recruiter, not the company. The recruiter referenced this law about having diversity. And I thought that was really interesting because an American recruiter, we didn't have those laws. And I explored this opportunity. Vivendi has been the longest job I've ever had. So it's been 10 years and it has been an amazing opportunity. I would not be here. I would not have these opportunities. I don't believe without this opportunity or without this law and this provision talking about the importance of diversity. And once you're on one board, I will tell you the dirty secret. Once you're on one board, it's much easier to be on a second board because a lot of recruiters, a lot of companies will hold that criteria and say, oh, we're only looking for people who have board experience. If you're never given that opportunities, you're never given that experience. And it has been amazing. I come prepared. All the other women on the board are well qualified, ask the best questions, and are well prepared. So I do see how these, you know, if they're whatever they're called, if they're quotas, if they're awareness, if they're laws, whatever, it helps speed and accelerate change. And I think that's for the better. We all know in our hearts and in the data that diversity allows us to do more innovative, better, more well-reasoned work. And it ends up being a net benefit for the companies involved. So I love this data. Thank you for sharing it. And I can speak firsthand of how it really makes a tremendous difference.
Thank you so much, Katie. Vincent, what actions have you been able to implement that have, in your vision, had the most impact on driving gender equity and diversity?
I think the first one was, I would say the simplest one, was to recruit new board members, which were more diverse. So I moved, from a board, which was when I took over as a CEO, 80%, 20% female. So already there were 2 women. I recruited 3 new members, and 2 of them were women. And they had some very important position in the organization, and they're not the typical HR, as you know. Well, yes, you had HR, but you had also finance. You had the big boss of Nivea, and you had the boss of R&D. So very important position. But the second element, which I think was more instrumental, I gave a specific target with some money allocated to that to each board member, with a specific KPI, because I think the mistake would have been to have a kind of wishy-washy global KPI, like we have to improve diversity. No, I gave the feedback, I gave the target to each of them in an area where they could make a difference. I gave, for example, the target to the 2 big boss of regions to have at least by 2024, 35% of their country manager being female leaders, versus 5% today. I gave the guidance, the target for the head of supply to have 50% of his factory directors being female by the end of 2024. I gave even the challenge to the head of marketing Nivea, to have more men in the organization because she had more female. And guess what? Because the board member people are interested by the accomplishment of their bonus and their target, we over-delivered versus this target. We ended up, at the end of 2023, even 1 year ahead of 24, 50% of the leadership position occupied by women. We had 80% of the factory managed by women. What people said it's a man's job. No, 80% are managed by a female. And we had 50% of the country manager. All the big countries of Beiersdorf are led by women. Could be Brazil, could be India, could be China. That makes also a big difference. I had also myself a personal target, which could not happen without each of them delivering that target, which also give me also an incentive to push each of them to deliver the target. And this is where we are to do. And the good thing, which I think was something you mentioned also, the gender diversity was followed also extremely well done by pay equity. So we are also very happy we checked that. We did a big survey that we have a gap today at the global level of 0.96%. So men are overpaid by 0.96%, which is nothing. And globally in Europe, it's 2%. We will still try to improve that, but we are also able to say not only do we have the right gender diversity, but we have also the right gender equity, which is an extremely strong message also for the organization.
That's for sure. Equity is central in this discussion. That's for sure. Perhaps, Katie, what about you? What do you think is the most powerful action you've been able to take?
I think the most powerful action I've been able to take has been both the transparency of data, the accountability of data. From day one of starting Moxie, I have reported on, and we have now reported on, all of our diversity statistics across our portfolio. We invest in men, we invest in women, we invest in all kinds of founders, and we don't have quotas, but at least by being transparent and reporting on that data, it holds us accountable, making sure that we have a diversified funnel of great founders. The other thing that we've done is been transparent. You can see actually on our website where we talk about our LPs, our limited partners, and our investors. And half of our investors happen to be women. And the majority of our capital is coming from female check writers. And that's quite new as well. So I do think being transparent, being open, being accountable about the numbers in our individual businesses can accumulate and it can spread. And hopefully it can become the de facto way of having how we do business.
Thank you very much, Katie. So now to kind of summarize what we've been discussing, Vincent, maybe first, what concrete actions can we take at all levels to defend gender equity and diversity at a personal, professional, and societal levels?
I think we should not, CEO should not lecture the world. So we're not there to tell everybody what to do, what not to do, but at our scale, and the 3 levels that you mentioned are exactly the right one. We should participate to this engagement. In Germany, we had this extremely sad moment, with the election in Germany, where an extreme right party, a post-Nazi party, got 20% of the votes. And I was very proud to see a lot of big CEO of the DAX and big companies, Deutsche Bank, this kind of company, taking a stance and saying loud and clear, we are in favor of diversity, we are in favor of inclusion, we are against, the values that this party is representing, even inviting people to demonstrate. I did that. There was some huge demonstration in Hamburg. And I think it was very nice because only one CEO of a mid-sized company in Germany supported the AfD. The other one were all aligned with this position. We also, and I know what is happening in the US easily, and I'm very sorry for our American friends, started to have this conversation about diversity. We took also a stance, but not only as a global company, but even our US organizations say, no, we have to be true to engagement in DNI. We have to continue to do what we are doing. And I made it clear, externally, internally, again, not at the global level. I'm not, I'm just a small CEO of a big company in Germany, but being sure that our people feel proud, feel reassured the fact that what we believe in is really something which is something we deliver. It's important for my company. My company is a Jewish company during the war. So it's a company, despite being a German company, was leader were, attacked, and they were hidden in Denmark in order to save them from the Nazi. So everything which is about, these old values, of the past, everything which is about, challenging diversity, equity is extremely important for us. And this is why, as a CEO, I felt that was necessary to take position. I struggle a little bit, to be honest, because I'm French, and I thought, can I take a position in a German environment? But after a few discussions with some of my peers, I felt absolutely allowed and ready to take this position and to maintain more than ever our commitment in diversity and inclusion.
And thank you for that. How about you, Katie? What are your views on the topic?
So look, I know it looks pretty grim out there. There is a level of darkness that I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime. And it's really easy to put your head in the sand and feel like an ostrich. And I feel that kind of gravity. And if you're tired, I understand the need to rest. But it is more important than ever that we all stay informed. We all stay engaged. If you're tired, rest, but you need to get back up. And it's going to be really important for, when we're well rested. And I know we can do this, to speak up, to do the work, to help each other, to do what you can with what you have. That we know that this, I believe in my heart of hearts, that this is a blip. And I know that this is the right thing to do. And life is a series of zigs and zags, and we go back and forth. And we're kind of zagging right now. So rest up, know that it will get better, and we have to help each other.
Thank you so much. Sorry. Go ahead, Loïc.
Up to you. Thank you very, very much, Iselis and Katie before. So now to all of you, what advice would you have for 20-year-olds today? Maybe Angeles first and then Vincent?
Goodness. I said to Iselis, I feel like an old grandma when I'm asked these kind of questions. But I would say a couple of things. First of all, remain faithful to your deep beliefs. We live, I mean, the world is uncertain. Things will change. There will be, opinions go up and down. There's themes become fashionable and unfashionable. But that cannot shape the way we think or the path we take. It doesn't mean that we need to be religious about things and we cannot accept that there are contrarian opinions. I think we also need to be sensitive to the fact that maybe sometimes the best way to provoke change is also to understand what's in it for others. But definitely remaining faithful to a path, to our, what we called earlier, our North Star, I think is super key, because it will be a source of not only effectiveness in change, but also self-fulfillment. And one feels more proud when you are aligned and happier. The second piece of advice is, and this is specifically for women around the call, I think sometimes when we talk about women evolution in business, a lot of people talk about mentors and mentorship, as if women needed more mentorship than men. I don't think we need more mentors, but I think we need more sponsors. And there's a difference between the two. Sponsors are people who believe in you, who talk about you, who give you chances, who are able to overcome fear when decisions are made, who are able to give a strong reference, who are able to connect you to somebody else. Seek for those sponsors rather than seeking for mentors. You don't need a quiet advice in a corner to say that you're great. You know it already. What you need is people who do the job to present you to the world in your best attire. Look for them, work with them, solicit them, and be actors of the movie rather than people watching the movie. That would be my two pieces.
Thank you, Angeles. Vincent, any advice?
I mean, it's a great advice, and I should have listened to you 20 years ago, Angeles. I think, I happen to have 3 boys which are age 20, so I'm having this kind of conversation with them. I'm telling them 2 things. One, which they are doing, which is great, which I didn't do myself, which is to discover the world. I mean, I remember I left my hometown of Marseille. I was 20, and I discovered the world. But I see my kids being bored also in Portugal, in Germany, in Japan, having this appetite to discover the world, and also this notion of diversity. You just have to live it, to discover other cultures. You also learn how good your culture is. I mean, you love your country even more when you live abroad, but it's enriching you and making you much more open to a lot of things happening across the world. And the second element, I think, I clearly see also the difference with this generation versus my generation. I'm also telling them, design your own life. I'm from a generation which, for example, the word sabbatical did not even exist. We are after school, we're going to work, and we were also following the direction of the company. L'Oréal was sending me to Japan, I go to Japan, sending me to Latin America, I send to Latin America. No, I mean, decide what you want to do. Decide also if you want to work for a big company or to move to a startup. Decide if you want, like Angeles, to be a big headhunter, and then suddenly to move to a Legrand, which has nothing to do with what she has done before.
Nothing.
And that's something which I find super exciting for them. They don't have this fear. They don't have the fear of not finding a job. They also want to have the great work and life balance. They don't want to spend nights and days working for a company. They want also to take into account the career of their partner, which is something I never did, and it cost me also a divorce. So this kind of thing, which I think is super refreshing and super exciting also. Design your life, decide what you want to do, and don't let the company deciding for you. That's something I would tell me myself if I could, but I'm telling them today.
Design your life. Thank you. How about you, Katie? Do you have any advice?
It turns out that I have 3 children in exactly this zone. So I have 2 22-year-olds and 1 24-year-old. So I feel like I'm qualified to provide some of this advice. And I also feel like I should be 22 still, but I'm not. So my advice would be, first and foremost, become fluent in another language. And I know AI can help you and do Google Translate and all these things, but my biggest regret is how terrible my French is. I've lived in Paris and I love Paris. I come to France all the time and my French is still not great. So become fluent in another language. You will appreciate it. It will compound throughout the rest of your life. It's better to learn a foreign language when you're 20 than when you're 40. Your brain is still elastic, so do that. The other fluency you should do is become fluent in AI tools. AI will replace some jobs, but they won't replace all jobs. And the faster you become fluent in all the different ways that AI can help you turbocharge your career, the better it'll be. And that too will start to compound. There are a lot of people scared of AI for a lot of reasons. Don't be scared of it, embrace it. I remember even with, the phone in schools, and teachers were so afraid, like, oh my God, what will the phones do? But it just became a part of reality. So just know that's going to be part of reality. And then the last thing, which is kind of related, is that I used to think, I would tell my kids, follow your dreams, follow your passions. And that kind of makes a lot of sense, but then it doesn't. Because if you follow your passion and you're really bad at it, then you're going to be miserable. And, my passion is like, I love to cook, and it turns out that I'm really bad at it. And so I've kind of given up on it. I'll never be a chef, and that's fine because I can outsource it. But so my advice would be, get really good at something. Follow your talent. If you are naturally good at cooking, follow that and master that skill. Do it over and over and over again. Work really hard. Find those people around you that can get better. That network and this sense of compounding will help turbocharge. And once you have followed your talents, once you've gotten really, really, really good at it, I promise you that will become your passion, and it will help you get to the place where you own your time. The faster you can own your time, the better.
Thank you so much, Katie. So we've had really good questions coming from the chat during this webinar. So we have a little bit of time to take a few. Maybe a first one that was interesting. How can we address male colleagues' concerns that focusing on gender or quotas will take away their opportunities?
It's a very legitimate question, and one that was actually asked to me a couple of times by male colleagues, but also by journalists and other stakeholders. I think, first of all, we shouldn't hide away from the fact that they also feel they can feel at some points that they are mistreated, and that some of these generations, their perception is that they have been sort of paying somebody else's bill, if that makes sense, because they arrive at a point in time where we need to adjust. The gap is too large just to rely on normal evolution, and therefore we need to close the gap over a specific generation. So I think the first thing I do is acknowledge. I don't deny that this might create situations in which their chances of being promoted or taking another role might be less than they were before. The second thing I do is I invite them to look midterm and look at the big picture. I truly believe that companies and organizations that are diverse are more performant, more creative, more fun, and more inclusive for all sorts of diversity of thought, which I think is the crucial diversity that really matters. And I also have two boys. I also have a girl, but I always tell them, be very careful on how you pick your employers. Go to companies that really believe in this, because it will create an environment that is more interesting, more stimulating, more fun, more open-minded, that will let your creativity express. And it's a marker for good companies. So there's something around maybe sacrificing a little bit the short term for medium term and larger things that I think is in the benefit of men also.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And then maybe one very last question. Have you ever implemented diversity initiatives that turned out to be ineffective or even counterproductive? And if so, how did you adjust your approach?
I can give you one of my big obsession, which is to recruit people with disabilities. This is really, I think, one of the diversity where we are weak, and even what the few governments are giving as a kind of quota, 5%, we are not even there. Then I gave, the direction to the company to really work to develop some plan. And very nicely, the Brazilian team wanted to follow the advice of the CEO. So they recruited 20 people, except that when I came back 1 year after, the 20 people had left because, they were so quick at just filling a hole. They recruited people with disability. They didn't take the right people, and the right people, they were also headhunted by somebody else because we are not the only company interested by this target. We did not design the right training plan. We did not even take into account the fact that they had to live close to the office because transportation and everything. And it's very interesting because 2 weeks ago I was in India where we totally learned from that. We not only we developed a true training plan and a true recruitment process. In fact, we treated them like, into brackets, normal employees. So we train the right people. We also don't put them only on basic job, but we want to develop them as a normal employee. We also treat them the way we treat a good employee. If they are coming late to the office after a few times, they are fine. We don't, treat them differently that we treat different employees. We also did something fantastic. The management team has learned the language of signs, which is also creating a strong connection. Of course, each of the people with disabilities have a sponsor inside the organization, being there to coach them. So, and the last thing we did, which was, I think, the fantastic idea, we invited the families to come and to see the way their children, because they are all young, were treated. So they felt, reassured about the welcoming attitude of Beiersdorf, the way that, there was the right security also. They have a beeper, when there is an alarm, fire alarm, they don't hear it when they have hearing problem. So they are the only one having a beeper, which is open when there is an issue. So everything we showed make the family super happy and of course supportive. And you will not be surprised, I tell you that those employees are not only there, but we are able to recruit new people. So that's something where I learned a lot also that because as I said in the beginning, this specific diversity is not obvious, and I know that it will take me time to get to the same level of success that I had with gender diversity, to have this diversity, but we will clearly make it happen. And by 2030 at the latest, we should have 5% of our employees being people suffering from disabilities.
Thank you so much, Vincent. And thank you really for your time, your courage, and your belief, because I think that today we really see who believes in diversity, equity, and in all kind of way. And so thank you. You can be sure that we will remain consistent on this subject, because it's no-brainer engagement for us. I deeply believe in this, and really. I do agree with Angeles. Our generation has perhaps more a tougher job than we have thought. So let's do it. I remain positive. We know better what we have to fight against. So it can be as well positive to look at it like that. So I do thank you. We will be next year at a webinar, but we will be all year long working on it and trying to have a positive impact. Our level, which is even a small one, is important. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.